Okay, it's 8:30 and we're going to get started. My name is Matt O'Donnell. I'm a Tech Innovation Specialist at SCO. And I have three other partners here with me who are going to introduce themselves. I guess we'll start with Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan Crota, and I teach TKK at University Elementary in Roanoke Park. Excited to be here with you all.
Yeah.
I'm Anna Babarande. I'm the coordinator for science education at SCO.
And hi, I'm Kelly Materi. I work on increasing equitable access to multiple content areas at SCO.
Okay, we're going to share quite a bit of resources with you, and we're going to do questions at the end. But if you have a question during any part of the presentation, please put it in the chat so you don't lose your train of thought. We'll monitor those and make sure we address those as we're going forward. I'm going to share my screen now. We're recording all these so you can go back and watch any of the information later on. All right, so we're going to start with what is this project that you have signed up to learn more about? And Ryan's going to take it from here.
All right, so we are very excited to help you launch a project-based learning unit, PBL as we call it, focused on the topic of community for the start of the new school year. We're living in very interesting times, social and emotionally, and this PBL unit will support you in building classroom community, developing relationships, and engaging students in meaningful learning while addressing those core academic skills and collaboration skills as well. This PBL unit will elevate your students' voices, allows your students to become the leaders and propose ideas around what they want for their community. Kids are in this pandemic times are often thought of as, the least known victims of this crisis, and we want to give them a voice in this time. And the final products that your students create in this PBL unit are presented to a public audience of your choice, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And this topic of community is highly customizable to your grade level and your student needs. And the SCO team here will support you with professional development as you implement your project. So this is a really interesting graphic. It talks about the difference between projects and project-based learning. And this can mean the difference between the dessert and the main course. I know it's early in the morning, but food, here we go. So traditional projects, think of it as the dessert. So the instruction and learning happens before the project. The project is the dessert after the instructional meal. Now, we all do these great traditional projects and they're awesome. They're, students get a lot out of them, but they're not PBL, but they do have their place. So I just wanted to put that out there. But for project-based learning, what we'll be doing with this community project, know that the instruction and learning happens through the project as a means to solve a real world problem or question. The project is the hearty main course. So the project is where the learning happens. So you as the teacher, you identify the student learning needs as they figure out products to create that can solve or answer the challenging problem or question. And you plan your instruction based on those needs and help guide your student research. Now, as students are doing their research, you're helping curate that resource bank for them, whether that be text, primary documents, videos, writing, hands-on investigations, interviews with experts, and of course in this time, they're virtual, and fieldwork. And of course, during this time, where it's safe to do so as examples. And throughout the project, you're doing feedback. You're giving your students feedback. Students are giving feedback to each other, and assessments are embedded throughout that are in alignment with your academic standards and team building skills, because students will be collaborating. And then at the end of the PBL unit, student products are assessed and presented to a public audience. And also students reflect on their experience to solidify their learning. So when they think about everything that they've gone through, they've been through, their learning, their collaboration, they really get a sense of who they are and what they learned. And just to add at the end of this, like, why are we doing project-based learning? I'm sure your administration, we always have to prove why we're doing what we're doing, and it works. So research shows that PBL has positive outcomes related to student engagement, knowledge retention, problem-solving strategies, just to name a few. So we're very excited that we are choosing this methodology to start this new school year with you.
And we understand that many of you are trying project-based learning for the first time, and we're going to put some scaffolding up to help you build this into your system and design it for you or alongside you so it's easy for you to implement this with this first unit. And we will have additional units as we move forward. Sorry. Slide. So one of the reasons we decided to do project-based learning is throughout the last year, there's been an initiative in Sonoma County called the Portrait of Sonoma. The Portrait of a Graduate. And the Portrait of a Graduate are the skills that the community believes that graduates should have throughout any school in Sonoma County. And these are skills that are often not measured at schools, but all teachers and community members agree that these are the skills they want students to have. And you can see on the right is the overview of the Portrait of a Graduate. And you have curiosity, empathy, communication, collaboration, ethics, and initiative. And we often say we want our students to have those skills, but we don't give them much of a chance to practice those skills. So this is a way that we can give students to practice those skills. To learn more about the Portrait of a Graduate, there's a link on the bottom left that says sonomapog.org. You can get free posters of that and learn more about what that looks like. But these are some of the skills in addition to the content area that we really want students to get during this project. Kelly, you're muted.
Devil's in the details. I got to unmute. So Ryan, I want to give a shout out to you because you not only got me super excited about this project, like I wasn't enough already through your slides, but also hungry. So
Exactly.
with your dessert versus the meal metaphor.
Food's always good.
That's right. It's always good. I'm always ready for food. So with this question of why should my students participate, I really am a true believer in this work. And I feel like, and I know that when we give students choice in their learning and agency and voice and give them a sense of purpose to the work that they do, the learning happens at a deeper level, and it's both content area learning and it's learning around collaboration and communication. And we know that as their brain is kind of making those connections around content area standards, it's also making connections around how to live and work and thrive really as a person and as an educator, as a mother, as a human. That excites me. So I really believe that doing this kind of work is worth that time and investment. I also am deeply aware as a educator, mother, and human that we are heading into distance learning, and that there's the possibility of some hybrid or face-to-face learning for some, if not all students in the near future as well. And this project is a project that can really be not just workable, but actually work. I'm going to go out on a limb here. Work better than traditional learning and instruction in a distance learning format, as well as in a hybrid format. So you don't have to worry like, oh, I'm starting in distance learning, but then what if we head back to school, or will it work in distance learning? As you'll see as we move on, it really can be used in either context, and it transitions well between the two contexts, which I think will be really important for both educators, students, and their families to be able to create some instruction that weathers that transition.
And if you saw the keynote last night, Ted Dintersmith really teed up what we were trying to do here. He said students need this type of learning. This is the agency that we want to build, and that fits along perfectly with the project that we're embarking on.
Mm-hmm. So that all of that being said, I recognize the fact that as a teacher, especially whenever I would kind of be faced with an opportunity to try something new or different that I hadn't done before, or that my students hadn't done before, that I would have some reservation around, well, can they do this? They don't have the skills for this yet. And one of the things, again, that excites me about this work is students don't need these skills before you embark on, like these skills that Matt highlighted in the Portrait of the Graduate, the collaborative skills we can anticipate students would need for project-based learning. the self-regulation skills that we know that they would need. They don't need those ahead of time. This is actually how we help them build those skills. So if they've got them, great. We develop them further and deeper. If they don't have them, this is actually how we learn by doing, right? So we offer scaffolds, we offer, positive reinforcement and feedback, but you get what you practice. And so if we practice giving students opportunity to engage with research and project-based learning and managing their time and formulating questions, all the great things that that your students will have a chance to do in this work, they'll build them. They'll build those skills.
Now, as we all met in the spring, as you can hear, all of us are big fans of project-based learning and feel like there's a lot of ways in that you can give students agency and engage them. And we really felt like this is a moment when we can try this out as a whole county with some scaffolding and support and just see what happens. And there are several major areas that are often stumbling blocks as people consider project-based learning. Two of them that I'll address are actually being called into question anyway with distance learning, with hybrid learning. We're having to rethink how we do them. And we have some supports around this for project-based learning. One is assessment. How do I authentically assess what students are doing as they work on these projects, as they do something that might be different than what they've done before and what I'm familiar with as a teacher? We have a number of PBL rubrics that we can provide for you to use with your students. And we also are going to give some webinars that give you extra support around those. And we'll give you a chance to ask one-on-one questions and get feedback for your particular situation. We'll show you all of those resources at the end, but know that they are there for you. And another big stumbling block often for people is, how can I connect this to my content? And this is true whether you're teaching kindergarten or whether you're teaching 12th grade. There's a lot of just question around, can I really teach what I am charged to teach while I'm doing these projects? Well, we have spent a lot of time with this particular project-based learning on community. We got feedback from teachers, thought about what is universally accessible to different age levels and in different content areas. And then we've spent some time already going through and aligning with the California History, Social Science Framework, NGSS, and then Common Core ELA and math, and figuring out how could a teacher merge all of those together, or if you teach a single subject, how could you teach this unit in the context of that subject? So we have a lot of ideas already for you. We also have content specialists that can help you align the project to your content areas. And we'll spend time later today brainstorming particular ideas. Even if you can't come to that session, that is recorded and it is documented in the folder where we'll show you all the resources. So you can go back and look at, how might this really apply to me and help me to teach what I am charged to teach, as well as build all of these skills for students.
And I just want to update, one of the bit.lys was changed, so somebody can put that in the chat. The new bit.ly for the resources is bit.ly/SCO-PBL. It's shorter, and that has the link to all the folders, including those assessment rubrics that Anna was talking about. It will also have the slide deck from this presentation, and we'll have the videos for all 3 sessions after the Summer Institute.
And it's SCO-PBL?
Yep.
Okay, it's coming to you now.
So the timeline of this project, we wanted to make this project something for you to kick off the year with, and knowing that there's 40 districts in Sonoma County, everybody's starting the year off at different dates. People don't have their traditional way of getting to know their students because you're all starting in distance learning. So we didn't want to start the first week of school because we know that that's precious time for you to get started. We want you to get to know your students a little bit first, but then have a project that you could jump into. So we picked the official start date for August 31st. That Monday is when we'll start as a group. Now, if your school or if your calendar doesn't work that way, by all means, you do not have to follow our timeline. You can take the information we're doing, you could use it later in the year. You could start much later if you wanted. You can shorten it, you could make it longer, but we are going to start that one and go on a 4-week period and support people during this time period. So we will support you by hooking you up with a mentor, and that mentor will share resources with you each week. They'll email different handouts for you. They'll let you know when the webinars are, and they'll help you connect with content area people if you need that. So the first week, there will be a project launch. We'll talk, well, I'll let Ryan for a little bit because he's going to do this in the second session, but just really briefly explain what a project launch might look like.
Yeah, sure. So project launch. So you are sparking the initial motivation in your students to get interested in this project. And also you as a teacher are thinking about, okay, what are you going to have to what do you have to teach? And what is relevant content that you can bring forth to this project? So example launches could be maybe having a community expert, you know, create a video and saying, this is the challenge. Or you can have, you know, have students go out in the field if it's safe to do so, and maybe look for, you know, some, you know, questions around their environment. So I'm thinking about, okay, how can they improve their community? There could be many different ways to launch a project, but you're sparking that initial motivation in your students.
Sure, and we're going to create a launch for the entire group. So we're going to have a video about what is community with people in Sonoma County explaining what they think community is to them. And it's going to be a relatively short video. But the driving question overall is what is community, but you're going to form a secondary question that's going to really connect it to your classroom and their community. And you can decide if you want to do that with an entire class or if you want to do smaller student groups, and they all have a secondary question where they might focus on something like social justice, or they might focus on making the best distance learning community, whatever it is that's going to adopt best to your classroom. And your launch will be a little bit different depending on what you do. So in that first week, you're also going to form your student groups to decide if you want to do it whole class or if you want to do smaller groups. Before that week, we will provide a collaboration and skills webinar to talk about the best way students can collaborate online through distance learning to document what they're learning. So you're also going to be figuring out what is that authentic problem your students are going to be solving, because that is going to be the main part of this project. Is what is the project? What is the thing that they're going to solve? It has to be a real world problem. And once you figure that out, you're going to figure out what is that public audience that you're going to present to. So week 2, we will give a feedback webinar for you to show how students can give feedback to each other and how you can give feedback to students as well and how to assess that. Students will begin their inquiry, doing some learning on their own and in groups on how to solve the problem that they're looking at. They are going to have a prototype, and we will also talk later on what a prototype is, so you can assess what they're going to do. Remember, in project-based learning, you're grading the entire process, not just the final product. So it's important that you're giving feedback all the time. The feedback from a teacher and feedback from another team will happen at this time, and they'll make revisions to their prototype as they move forward. Week 3, we'll do another webinar on different types of presentation skills and platforms that students might want to use to present their material to an authentic audience. They're going to submit their prototype to get feedback again with the revisions that they've made. This time we want them to get feedback from a community member, somebody outside of the classroom. Could be parents, could be a professional, could be somebody that's not part of the project at the beginning that can give fresh eyes on the prototype and give them some feedback. And we'll also have a project report with a progress report with the skills rubric, so that you're saying, here's where you're at, here's what you're doing so far. So again, we're assessing throughout the entire process. And then week 4 will be the public exhibition. And this will look different for each of you, and we will help you find ways to present to an authentic audience and help you try and connect with professionals in Sonoma County. We understand it's a little different with distance learning, and that we can't do a big event where everybody is in one place, but we can help you do smaller events, and we can also put some of your things on the website if it's appropriate for your problem that you're solving. We also have a reflection on the entire project where your teams will go over what they learned and what worked and what didn't work during the PBL process, and we'll have the final evaluation with the teacher.
Yeah, as Matt was saying, that this is one of the pieces that you'll be supported on in the webinars, the public exhibition. So at the end of a project-based learning unit, students make their learning visible through products that they create that are aligned with the standards and driving question. And they're presented to a public audience, and that public audience is going to be of your choice. You'll have time to think about who you want your students to present to and why. This could be the school board meeting, Sonoma County Board of Supervisors, school admin, the school community, the students' families, a business or business group. There's so many different options. But most importantly, during this time is how are we going to do the public exhibition? This could be through, videos, a website, Flipgrid, maybe an ebook. Maybe the students create physical product to send out. We really have to think creative and really be innovative with this public exhibition when we can all meet together. So.
Now, we're seeing some good questions in the chat, and Kelly has just encouraged you keep putting questions in there. If you're new to project-based learning, and this is your introduction, you probably have a lot of things that are coming up right now, like, what do you mean by a driving question? What does that even look like? Some of that we'll address here for you, and we're lucky Ryan has a lot of experience with PBL and what it looks like to carry a whole project through with his students, so he'll be able to speak to a lot of this. But this also speaks to the fact that we want to support you through the whole process. And we know as you're trying something, many things new in this new environment, you will need some extra resources. So for this project, if you decide to participate, you'll be assigned a PBL mentor. And this mentor is not doing the project for you, but they're a resource for you. They're checking in with you. They're helping you think through what might be an appropriate driving question for me and my students. They're helping you find resources to allow the students to collaborate and to do their own research. And they're helping you connect with professionals in the community that can be used both as you introduce the topic to students, but also are a potential authentic audience at the end. So we're not setting all of it up for you, but we're with you every step of the way. So if you are interested, and we'll go back to this at the end, this is a really great way to connect with the resources at the county office, but also connect with other educators in other schools. We encourage people to collaborate and to learn from each other across different schools and districts. Again, we'll come back to this at the end, but the way that you would signal that you are interested and that you would like to learn more and get more support would be to fill out the form that is linked on this slide. And then we'll share with you the spreadsheet of all the other participating teachers so you can contact each other. If you are the only one that teaches 4th grade in your district, but there's somebody else teaching 4th grade in another district, you can bounce ideas off each other. You'll also, from signing up, get access to all the webinars, and you'll be assigned that mentor who will reach out to you.
We'll put this link in the chat, and as we're going through questions in a few minutes, we'll let you go and sign up there as well.
So the upcoming sessions. So thank you guys for being coming to this session. We do have others to support you with this project. The next session will be on connection to content. So how can you integrate the different subject areas to make your curriculum relevant and meaningful to your students? And also the last session will be launching your, planning your project and customizing to your student needs. So the webinars for support that the SCO team talked about, there'll be webinars on Thursdays at 3:30 p.m. And the webinars are collaboration and documentation on August 20th, a session on feedback, August 27th, webinar and presentation and exhibition skills on September 3rd, and a webinar on reflection on September 10th.
And all those will be recorded, so if you missed them, and they will be on Thursdays at 3:30. But we will also send out, once you sign up, we'll send you information and reminders of when those webinars are happening, and we'll also send follow-up recordings of the webinars. So all the resources, as I mentioned earlier, are in this folder. So links to the rubrics for project planning. It'll probably be overwhelming when you look at that folder because there's so much stuff. And we wanted to add all possibilities in there, but you don't have to use all of those documents. It's just if you need those. And that's where the mentor can help you pick which of those resources is going to work best for you. So I'm going to give you minutes to go to the sign up page and sign up if you're interested in participating. It's not a commitment, but just so you want to receive more information. and then we will go to questions. So I'm gonna, go ahead.
We're also going to show you what's in the folder.
Sure, I can do that.
All the resources.
Can we put the sign up link in the chat box?
We
One
can.
of us have that handy.
Okay, so in the folder, the first folder is team collaboration. So these are contracts for students about what their different roles are and how to set up different groups. So that will help you with that. Second folder is going to be resources. It's going to be this slide deck and the videos. Sorry, my computer's a little bit delayed, but here's the first one that has some of those resources. Back. The third one is project planning. Now, this is a resource for teachers to how to organize your project and plan. And we're going to focus on that in the third session quite a bit. So we're going to walk you through how to plan the project to fit your needs. Fourth one is feedback. Those are some protocols for giving feedback with students and between each other. The fourth one, Ryan, you want to speak to that one?
Yes, so the elementary challenges. So these are just some, you'll get the opportunity to come up with your own ideas, but I always like hearing from other teachers and what's out there. So there are some example project ideas, or I call them project cards. They go over there, an example driving question, basically what the project is about, and some possible student products. So it's nothing set in stone, and not a full planned out PBL unit, but just an idea to get you going. So be sure to look in there if you need some ideas.
And then the last folder, oh, sorry, you have one more, Ryan.
Oh, these are career contexts. So there is in the elementary challenges, a unit idea on careers for TK5. And these are just some contexts that a resource bank that I've had over the past several years. Police unit contacts in the police, fire department, chemistry teacher, just any community member who I've worked with who said, yes, I'm willing to support other teachers in their PBL units. They were so gracious to put down their email, and you can contact them to maybe launch the project, or as the students are doing their inquiry and they need some more information, to reach out and say, hey, could you answer some questions that our students have?
And the last folder is different rubrics for different grade levels. And there's tons in there. You could use any of those, or you can modify them to fit your project. All right, so I'm going to stop the sharing, and we're going to go to questions.
So a couple that have already come up. One was, can you explain more about what a driving question is? I know Ryan put an example in the chat, but you might want to speak more to why is that so important?
Absolutely. So the driving question, again, it's aligned to your standards, and it's aligned to the project topic. So I put in the chat a driving question that I'm currently working on. I'm a developing unit on this topic, so I'm right there with you guys thinking about my students, is how can we get to know our students and create a classroom community? So that's our big overarching question, but to be able to answer this question, they're gonna have more questions too. Well, and the anticipated question that I see my students ask me is, okay, well, I want to know in this environment where I can't really see their classmates, so can't really see their classmates, they want to know, what is their family like? What are their pets? Where do they live? So those are the questions that come underneath the big overarching driving question, and that will help drive your instruction. What lessons you'll do. I plan on doing lessons on, neighborhoods and team building activities. So it's really the driving force of your project and help you plan your instruction. And usually how is a good word. It's not, the only word to use, but how can we is usually how I start to frame my questions.
To build on what Ryan is saying, for me, one of my kind of first, and something I still have to check myself on, my first learning curves when thinking of driving questions was having something that was maybe too specific or too Googleable, I guess, to put it one way, and really learning that the overarching or driving question is something that's really broad and open-ended and can be answered a handful of ways, and is the kind of thing that gets you thinking, right? That actually kind of piques your curiosity. And then it's those smaller questions that Ryan's talking about that come later and under that umbrella, where you can really start to drive into the specifics of your different content areas or different social emotional learning skills that you want to rise up in the work. But that first question shouldn't be something that has a right or wrong answer necessarily, and shouldn't be something that kind of comes off dry or boring, or like nobody really is interested in the answer to it, right? Like it's the kind of leading but big. So feel free to contradict me, team, but for me as a newer person to project-based learning, those were some of my ahas.
That's spot on. Yeah,
I just
it's being open-ended.
I just put a handout in the chat that has more information on driving questions, and it's a simple way of how to form a driving question.
Yeah. Another way you could phrase your driving question is, what can we do to, whatever you want to say, but have it be actionable. What can the students do? What do they have to learn? And again, it shouldn't be Googleable, as Kelly said.
And somebody had posted that that Ryan's driving question could lead to other connections, like how do you read that? And that's exactly what the driving question is intended to do, is to inspire a lot of different connections. Some of them the teacher might think of and really draw the students' attention to, but others, the students might make those connections on their own, and they might not be connections that the teacher ever thought would happen through that project or through that question. Another question that came up in the chat is, will we give some help around ideas for the community project? And the answer is yes, multiple times over. In session 2, we're really dedicated to how do we connect the content that we are teaching and our standards with this overall project. But that's also, even if you can't come to session 2, we're happy to brainstorm with you, and your mentor is happy to brainstorm with you. It shouldn't be something that takes away, that you feel like I have to smash this in on top of everything else I'm teaching. It should be something that is tied in with what you're teaching, but also is relevant and personal for students. And background, that's actually how we ended up with this community theme. When we first started to brainstorm, like what would be an interesting topic for PBL for the whole county, the first thing we actually came up with was exploring, is COVID-19 good or bad for the world? And you can make a lot of arguments both ways. We thought it was intriguing. But as we got feedback from teachers, they said, but what I'm actually more worried about starting the year is, how do I form any kind of community with these students that I've never met before and that I'm not necessarily meeting in person? And so that led to this other topic with 2 intents. 1, to help you form community with students and them form community with each other. But 2, for them to look at, where am I situated at this particular moment in history, and how am I influencing that, and how is it influencing me?
And I'm just going to speak quickly, because my colleagues can assure you that I get really excited about stuff and I can talk for a bit. If you've ever worked with me, you probably could concur. But what's exciting for me too is that when you think about content areas and for example, in science, community is a huge concept for students to explore in terms of community and ecosystems. When you look at historical, communities and civilizations over time, there's a lot that can be both authentic and relevant to where we are right now, as Anna says, and how can what we know about the world of science, the world of mathematics and history and art and all of these other content area kind of focuses, there's a lot that each content area can bring to bear when we're trying to understand community.
Now, what other questions do you have for us? There's no question too big, too small. Feel free you can write it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and say it.
I saw one that said, if we have to sign up right now, can we sign up after the other? Yeah, you can sign up. We're going to put the sign up at each session. Like again, it's not a commitment, but you can sign up after the 3rd session. We just wanted to make sure if you're only attending session 1 that you have the opportunity to sign up there. There will also be a sign up form on the project website, which is nomacommunityproject.org.
And Matt, I don't know offhand, I don't have my calendar in front of me. When is session 2? It's later on this morning, but the time, 2 o'clock, or this afternoon, 2 o'clock? Okay.
Yeah, so we're repeating this session after this, but don't come to that because it'll be the same information. And then we have 2 rounds of session 2, 2 rounds of session 3 to try to give you opportunities to attend. One is focused more on elementary, one on secondary each time, but it's roughly the same information. So if it doesn't align in your schedule to go to one or the other, it's totally fine.
So session 2 this afternoon is the secondary one. The session 2 for elementary is in the morning tomorrow. It is at same time as this one.
But again, they're interchangeable enough that don't feel like you're locked into something.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
So I know I have a staff meeting today at 2 o'clock and I'm not going to be able to attend. And I know you're videoing all of this. Can you help me now understand where I'm going to go so I can watch that video tonight?
Sure. So on the Disrupt website, I think there's the link, or sorry, the schedule. There's a link to all the different sessions folder, resource folder.
Mhm.
And in that resource folder, once the videos are processed, they will go into that folder. So it's right where your schedule is. Underneath the Zoom link, there should be another link that says resource folder.
Okay.
And for ours, it's that same one where all the resources are, and I'll put it in the chat again. It's bit.ly, sorry, just capitalize it.
And we're not going away. So if you look at that and you're like, I'm really confused about this one thing, we're happy to schedule a time to meet with you and kind of walk through it for your context.
So one thing to know about the videos, they're recorded in Zoom. And so we have to download them onto our computers and then re-upload them to Google Drive. And then so it takes a while for both of those things to happen. And then Google Drive takes a while to process. So they're not going to be available immediately. But probably, I would say by this evening, you'll be able to view them.
Okay. Just curious because I don't know how anyone else is feeling, but it seems like more and more ours with Zoom, we have to, as teachers, we're going to have to be doing that process. Is it a challenging process? Because that's something like if my kids couldn't make it to one of our meetings, it would be important. I guess it's a side question that I'm curious, is that process complex?
So it's not complex if you're recording in the cloud, because then you're just sending them the link and they could play it that way. But since we are putting the videos in specific folders where they can play in Google Drive and can be shared, it's a little bit more cumbersome than you would have to do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I will share a couple more learnings. So I was helping lead a professional development all of last week via Zoom. And we learned about a lot of pitfalls. One of them is that if you are recording it, but then you switch who the host is, that can lead to some disruptions in it. So just know that if you're sharing the screen with kids, you might get some glitches in the recording. And the second thing is that when it is processing, both to download it and then re-upload it, at least on my laptop, it ends up making a lot more noise. So I have to wait until a time when I'm not having to use the laptop and present to do that whole process, which adds to the time it takes.
I appreciate your question, though, Patricia. As a Universal Design for Learning, UDL is kind of one of my areas of interest, and I won't say expertise because that feels, I still feel like I have a mountain of things left to learn, but it's one of the things that I'm focused on learning and sharing with folks. Really looking at the balance between synchronous and asynchronous learning, which are terms that I feel like we're starting to hear a lot more now that we're going to distance learning and have been doing it, but the learning that happens when we're all together in the same time and place, and then the learning that students can access at their own time and access multiple times over, I think is really important for distance learning and actually in class learning as well, both in general and for this project in particular. And so I think one of the things that we can talk about as we move forward, like whether through mentorship or like connecting with other teachers, is how do we balance the pieces of a project-based learning project where kids are real time receiving support from their teacher or their peers, and how do we create and curate opportunities for them to access instruction that they can watch once, watch twice, watch 4 times, because I think that that's really important, both in terms of accessibility timing wise for students. Like you said, you have something else that you need to be doing and that's valid. And so, yeah, you should be able to access it later. And when we think about our students who have auditory processing issues or are second language learners, or like me, I'm ADD and I could be listening now, but then something happens over there and I miss a thing. I need to be able to come back later and hear it again. And so I think really thinking carefully about how we provide that accessibility is important.
And I'm also just thinking about kids who have families whose parents can't be there, or they're home by themselves and they do have some support that is just going to come later, and they want to watch it and just be able to have a deeper conversation or a deeper connection to the learning. What a cool opportunity for building support at home with families. That would be super cool. So thanks. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it was a subject that I hadn't really thought about, in the complexity of this learning style.
Yeah. And it's not lost on us either that if we choose community, right, as a focus and an umbrella for this project, we want to enact the project in ways that build community, right? Both like our SCO team and our folks like Ryan who are working with us. We want to be in community with you as educators, and we want this to be a process that builds community for you, and we also between each other, and then we also want to help support you guys in implementing and enacting this work in a way that helps build community amongst your students and amongst you and your students' families.
To build on the topic of families, that's so important. I think to build that culture of PBL within our school and with our families, I think having that meeting with our families and talking about the importance of PBL, like what we went through today, and giving clear expectations and letting them know how they will be involved with their child. What technology needs do they need to know about, whether it be Flipgrid or Seesaw or any of the platforms that you're doing. They also need to know as well, so they can best support their child in this PBL experience.
And I think that speaks really well to what Ted Dintersmith was talking about yesterday, that in general, one of the obstacles we face is that parents kind of expect school to be like what it was when they were in school. And by and large, PBL is not that. So it does take a little more messaging, say, this might look different, and yet it's addressing all of these needs that are coming up for the students in the moment, because we're in this moment, but also for what they need to be prepared for in the future. And if that feels intimidating to you, all of us are willing to help you think through, how do I message that to parents? And Ryan in particular has already had a lot of experience doing that with the families in his own class.
And that's
just being upfront with them. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you first, Ryan.
Yeah, just being upfront with your families and just saying, this is the project. I always send like a PBL letter of what we'll be doing and how they can be involved and what they need to know about. They really appreciate that, because again, this is something that they haven't experienced in their schooling, and they think it's really cool learning, and they wish they could have gone through this type of learning as a child. But let them know how they will be involved explicitly.
So Kelly Wong, I see you in the chat room there. I was just chatting privately with her and telling her that her questions and thinking, I always feel like, are so on point, and like she asks a question I'm either about to speak to, or she asks a question and it comes to me. So yeah, that's what I was going to say actually, is this conversation has me thinking about really making sure that as a group, as SCO, right, supporting this work, we connect with folks who are able to provide and help us provide and work together with you to provide some bilingual messaging around this. That's something that, again, it shouldn't be an individual lift for each teacher trying to do this, but that maybe we can work as a community to help create some of that messaging.
And remember, most of the support we're providing is for teachers, so it's not going to be going out to families and to students. That you as individual teachers will be adopting that to your own, because it's going to be different for every class. So, but like the video for the launch, we'll definitely, if we don't provide a Spanish version, we'll at least provide subtitles in Spanish for that. And so we will try and do that as much as possible.
And in terms of the messaging that Ryan is talking about, that's something that we could get translated and get out to you, and then it would just need to be customized a little bit for your individual context.
Yeah. And I would also kind of add that I absolutely agree with and support this idea that we've been talking about around engaging the families, talking with them, helping calibrate their understanding and expectations of what this kind of learning looks like. And I would caution against design, and again, we'll be there with you along the way to help be thought partners and mentor with you. Caution against designing the work in a way that expects or requires or anticipates that the students will have to have parent support at home, right? Like because for a variety of reasons, I think about the equitability of designing in a way that allows students to work with the resources that you provide them, and the scaffolding that you provide them, without assuming that they have a certain kind of parent support, or that the parent support, family support at home looks a certain way. So, and we can talk more about that in future sessions or offline. And then also around, I know even myself as a parent and an educator, I battle this with I have a rising fourth grader, and I have to battle this, helping parents understand that this doesn't mean it's their project that they're doing with or for their child, right? Because if they're in their home, you get the parents that are like, okay, we got this. We're gonna, go out and we're gonna do the best version of this. And that it really, kids will learn those valuable collaboration, communication, self-regulation, executive functioning skills if they're the ones owning the work, owning the project, right? So it's not like that thing where you assign, like when we think about those more traditional projects that Ryan talked about that are dessert, you assign like create this doll or create this book cover, and then one kid comes in and it's like done by the graphic design artist mother. I'm thinking of my own childhood. My mom was a sign painter, always had the nicest like art stuff, but a lot of it was not necessarily fully mine, right? Like there was heavy support from her. So kind of talking with parents about, we love and appreciate your involvement, and we want to help you know how this works. And this is your kids' learning and your kids' work. And we'll be there to help them engage with that.
Absolutely. And being mindful of, going to distance learning or hybrid or what have you, that talking with families that this PBL is a chance for, like Kelly said, for them to take ownership and for them to step away from the screen. If you've looked at any of the schedules that, districts are putting out, it's pretty rigorous as far as screen time. And this PBL allows that your child to, get that instruction, that content, and then step away from the screen and create their products, So I think it gives them a time to step away from the screen time.
Yeah, and understand when we talked about the portrait of a graduate earlier, those are skills when students graduate that we want them to have. We don't expect them to have them all the first day they go into school, and they need to have practice at doing these things. And just as many of you are doing project-based learning for the first time, it'll be the first time for students. So you have to anticipate that it's going to be messy, that there's going to be some mistakes made along the way. But if we don't give students an opportunity to practice, they're never going to get these skills. So couch it in that it is going to be a little bit messy, that some students are going to really struggle at first. But if you don't give them opportunity, they're not going to get those opportunities. So we will support you in that. But as Kelly said, and Ryan said, we don't want the parents to take this over. We don't want to have a perfect science fair type project that the parents did at the end of this. And that's why we're grading the entire process and assessing it, because we want to see the struggle. We want to get feedback. We want to make sure that kids are building agency over their own learning.
Yeah, and in session 2, you'll get to brainstorm and start thinking about how you're going to be planning your project in session 3. So you'll be thinking about ways to go about implementing this project, but just know, and from experience, what you have on paper will change, and that's okay, because you are going with your students and their interests and their questions. But again, keeping in mind the content that you intend to teach, but then you have that flexibility in knowing what you have to teach to then go with your students. So keep in mind that your plan will change. It's okay.
And Emily just asked, do all the final projects have to be the same? And the answer is absolutely not. That's one of the joys of project-based learning, is that there is some student voice and choice in so in taking ownership of their learning, they can take ownership of what their project might look like, how they want to present that. So there can be multiple different ways your students answer the question and present their findings. And they could be multiple different questions that your class is solving.
And from go ahead, Anna.
Oh, I think this speaks to something that is a really deep need already for students even prior to this crisis. I heard a lot from high school students. They would say, I'm so tired of finding the answer the teacher already knows. Like, woohoo, I found what I was supposed to again. And they're savvy enough to know that they're just going through the steps. This provides a way both for them to explore questions that don't necessarily have an answer, but also to express their findings in a way that's unique to them and not just some kind of form. And it makes teachers nervous because then we still need to assess that process. And that's why we have so many rubrics and supports for you as you try this out with the students.
And I also want to acknowledge that, again, as a person newer to project-based learning, and with a fair dose of having to monitor my need to control things, right? That sometimes the idea of leaving things open-ended, I would worry about rigor, right? I would worry about if a kid chooses something, is it going to be something like that to my mind is kind of bizarre or off the wall or too like low in a potential or possibility for what that kid could possibly produce. And I think as we, again, move forward, we'll share some different, ways of leading into the work for helping kids choose and design those projects, and B, rubrics that you also share with the students ahead of time, help calibrate what it is that we're looking for in a final project, so that there's still this choice, there's still this agency, the student kind of sees themselves and makes decisions in that. And we're helping set those expectations around, it needs to demonstrate this kind of thinking, or it needs to show that you possess this skill. And that can look a lot of different ways, but I don't, just to speak to my fellow folks who maybe think like me, I don't want you to worry that you're going to get some kid who does a really deep and meaningful project and another kid who just kind of does something that, you know, doesn't stretch their thinking and doesn't grow them as a learner. Or that you're going to get stuff that's off the wall and just doesn't, like, you know, help them learn the things that you're hoping that they'll learn. And also I want to share too that when you offer that choice, a lot of times your students will come up with things that are deeper, more impactful and meaningful than you would have ever come up with yourself, right? Like they'll lead you to places that are really exciting if we give them the chance to.
Yeah, and along those lines, that's why we have the prototype as part of the process. So when students come up with a prototype, that's where you're going to give them feedback and say, how are you going to accomplish this? What are the challenges you're going to face? What resources do you need? And you can, it's not like, as we showed that first slide, the difference between doing a project at the end where the student's kind of off on their own and then project's due and they've got nothing to show for it. You've given them feedback along the way and saw where their pitfalls might be. And you've also given them the opportunity to fail in what they tried to do. You know, if you watch Most Likely to Succeed, one of the main storylines that in Ted Dintersmith's movie was a student who tried to bite off too much, and the final exhibition came and he didn't have it ready, and it just showed him continuing to work after that date, and that was okay because he learned quite a bit from that as well. So, and he didn't fail that project because it wasn't ready, because he was getting assessed throughout the process on what his plan was, on what his communication was, and maybe on the exhibition part of it he didn't get a high score, but he got maybe a high score on other parts of it. So it's a learning process throughout.
So you can see how PBL really meets it meets students where they are and where they are in their abilities and skill levels. I remember in this project that I'll talk about in session 3, where the students had to propose why their city improvement model would benefit the city and all of that. And they had to do an opinion piece. It was first grade. They had to write their opinion of why they think their idea would be better for the community. And this child had struggled with writing that expressive piece that a lot of students do. So I allowed him to speak about his proposal and his model. He was able to give me that topic sentence and his reasons and his conclusion all verbally. And that's how I was able to meet him where he is. So it's a great equalizer and meeting students where they are. It's beautiful.
And Ryan, can you say that driving question again? Because I want to point out, and I'm the topic question that you just said, that this around student and improving the community. Because I want to point out, this was a first grade class, and I want to just like lift up the depth of the question. And it's a question that he used with first graders, and it was a successful question with first graders.
Yeah, repeat that. Yeah. So it's how can we improve, how can we make our community a better, more interesting place? And with that project, it went with our standard of understanding our community, right? And like I said, I'll talk more about this project and come to session 3, please.
Sorry, not to jump the gun.
Oh no, yeah, no, I'm trying to say come to session 3, right? It's a good invitation. But yeah, the students had to come up with an idea of how to improve their community. How often do we ask kids what are their ideas, you know, at such a young age? Maybe middle school, high school, but elementary, they have so many ideas and we need their voice. So they had to get into groups, they had to brainstorm, okay, what do we want for our community? This one group came up with a water park, and they had to design a model about it, and they also had to explain, why do we need a water park in Roanoke Park? They had to write about it. They had to, you know, think about measurement of their model, and so that math skills came into play. We'll talk about content integration session 2, but how does math come into play authentically? How does reading and writing come into play? We read books about community. We read books about improving homes. We did that reading and language skills that are required of us in the Common Core, but in an authentic way. So hope that gets your ideas going so you can come to our next session and plan your project.
Ryan, can you type the driving question in the chat? We have a couple people.
Absolutely.
And we know we're pretty much at time. We know you probably need a 2-minute break before you jump into your next session. But know, again, that we're not going to wait. So if questions come up, please feel free to reach out anytime to any of us. And as Kelly said, if your interest is piqued and you think this might be me, go ahead and fill out that form, and we're not going to come after you if it doesn't work out later. But we want to make sure we have your contact information to get you everything and all the resources and webinars and support. So.
And I just put my email address in the chat. So feel free to email me if you have individual questions that you think of later on.
Thank you all for coming and listening and hearing about this. And we're, as you can tell, probably we're really excited about this work. So we appreciate you coming and hearing about these ideas, and we hope that we'll continue to engage with you as we move forward.